November 17, 1558. A 25-year-old woman kneels under an oak tree at Hatfield House, reading her Bible in Latin. A messenger arrives on horseback. He dismounts, bows, and delivers the news. Your sister, Queen Mary, is dead. Long live Queen Elizabeth. The young woman, who'd spent her childhood declared illegitimate, her teenage years under house arrest, and part of her 20s imprisoned in the Tower of London suspected of treason, has just become Queen of England. Against all odds, against every expectation, against a world that believed women were too weak, too emotional, too inferior to rule alone. And one of her first acts, she tells her advisors she will not marry, ever. I will have but one mistress here, she declares, and no master. The court is shocked. A queen without a king? Impossible, unnatural, dangerous. But Elizabeth I would prove them all wrong. Over the next 45 years, this unmarried woman would defeat the most powerful military force in Europe, the Spanish Armada, transform England into a global power, preside over a golden age of art, literature, and exploration, give her name to an entire era, the Elizabethan Age, inspire a cult of personality as Gloriana, the Virgin Queen. And she did it all by refusing to give up her power to a husband. This is the story of Elizabeth I, and how one woman's refusal to marry changed the course of history. Subscribe right now if you want deep dives into history's most fascinating figures. Hit that bell. Drop a comment. What do you want to know most about Elizabeth I? Marriage politics? The Spanish Armada? Her rivalry with Mary Queen of Scots? Because Elizabeth I isn't just another monarch. She's one of the most complex, contradictory, brilliant rulers in history. She was ruthless and compassionate, strategic and emotional, loved by her people and feared by her enemies. She cultivated an image as a divine virgin queen while playing European royalty against each other with marriage negotiations she never intended to complete. She presided over a cultural renaissance while authorizing torture and executions. She was a product of brutal circumstances who became one of history's greatest survivors. Let's start at the beginning, with a childhood that would have destroyed most people, and see how it forged one of England's greatest monarchs. September 7, 1533, Greenwich Palace. Elizabeth Tudor was born into a scandal. Her father, King Henry VIII, had broken with the Catholic Church, defied the Pope, and risked war with Catholic Europe, all to divorce his first wife Catherine of Aragon and marry Anne Boleyn. Why? Because he needed a male heir. The Tudor dynasty was young. Henry's father had won the throne in battle only 48 years earlier. Henry believed only a son could secure the succession, and Boleyn promised him that son. She gave birth to Elizabeth instead. Henry was furious, disappointed. He'd risked everything for a daughter. Elizabeth's christening was grand, fitting for a princess, but the disappointment was obvious. The elaborate preparations for celebrating a prince were repurposed for a princess. May 19, 1536. Elizabeth is 2 years and 8 months old. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, is executed at the Tower of London, charged with adultery, incest, and treason, almost certainly framed by Henry and his advisors who needed to remove and so Henry could remarry and try again for a son. Anne was beheaded with a sword, a mercy. Normally traitors were burned. Her final words praised the king. A gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never. Days before Anne's execution, Henry had their marriage annulled. Legally, this meant Elizabeth was now illegitimate, a bastard with no claim to the throne. She was removed from the line of succession, stripped of her title of princess, sent away to live in a separate household. Elizabeth's childhood was unstable and traumatic. Between ages 2 and 10, she watched her father marry 4 more times. Jane Seymour gave Henry his son Edward, then died days later. Anne of Cleves, divorced after 6 months. Catherine Howard, executed for adultery when Elizabeth was 8. Catherine Parr survived Henry. 2 stepmothers executed. 1 divorced. 1 died in childbirth. This taught Elizabeth crucial lessons. Marriage was dangerous, especially for women. Love offered no protection. Her father claimed to love and bully. Power was everything. Survival required intelligence and adaptability. But Henry eventually restored Elizabeth to the succession, 1543. After Edward, his son with Jane Seymour, and Mary, his daughter with Catherine of Aragon, Elizabeth was third in line. Not ideal for Henry, but better than leaving the succession unclear. Elizabeth's education. Despite her uncertain status, Elizabeth received an excellent education, unusual for a woman in the 1500s. Her tutor, Roger Ascham, taught her Latin, Greek, French, Italian, and some Spanish, theology and philosophy, history and rhetoric, music. She played the virginals, an early harpsichord. She was brilliant, Ascham wrote. Her mind has no womanly weakness. Her perseverance is equal to that of a man, and her memory long keeps what it quickly picks up. This education would serve her well. When she became queen, she could read diplomatic correspondence in the original languages. She could debate theology with scholars. She could deliver speeches in flawless Latin. January 28, 1547. Henry VIII dies. Elizabeth's 9-year-old half-brother becomes King Edward VI. Elizabeth is 13. Edward was raised Protestant, like Elizabeth. His reign saw England move decisively away from Catholicism. But Elizabeth's position was precarious. She lived with her stepmother, Catherine Parr, Henry's widow, who quickly remarried Thomas Seymour, a charming, ambitious man with designs on power. Seymour Scandal, 1548. Thomas Seymour began making inappropriate advances toward the teenage Elizabeth. Historical accounts describe entering her bedroom in his nightshirt, slapping her buttocks, tickling her in bed, attempting to kiss her. Catherine Parr eventually sent Elizabeth away. But when Catherine died in childbirth, September 1548, Seymour proposed marriage to Elizabeth. She was 15. He was 40 and using her for political gain. Elizabeth wisely refused. When Seymour was later arrested and executed for treason, plotting to marry Elizabeth and overthrow Edward, Elizabeth was questioned intensely. Had she agreed to marry Seymour? Was she part of the plot? Elizabeth's responses were brilliant, carefully worded, revealing nothing incriminating. She survived. Lesson learned: marriage proposals could be traps. Men who wanted to marry her often wanted her claim to the throne, not her. July 6, 1553. Edward VI dies at age 15. Edward's will attempted to bypass both his half-sisters, Mary and Elizabeth, in favor of their Protestant cousin, Lady Jane Grey. Why? Because Mary was Catholic. Edward's advisors feared she'd reverse England's Protestantism. Jane Grey's reign lasted 9 days before Mary rallied support and claimed the throne. Mary I's reign, 1553 to 1558, Elizabeth's most dangerous years. Mary, Bloody Mary, was determined to return England to Catholicism, punish Protestants who'd supported Edward's policies, secure her throne against rivals, especially Elizabeth. Wyatt's Rebellion, 1554. A Protestant uprising led by Sir Thomas Wyatt attempted to overthrow Mary and replace her with Elizabeth. Elizabeth almost certainly had no involvement, but Mary was convinced she did. Elizabeth was arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London, the same place her mother had been executed 18 years earlier. For 2 months, Elizabeth lived in terror. Would Mary execute her? Could she prove her innocence? She wrote to Mary, "I humbly beseech your majesty to let me answer for yourself, that I may show my truth." Mary didn't respond. Eventually, Elizabeth was moved to house arrest at Woodstock, then Hatfield. She remained under surveillance for years. Mary's reign was brutal. Over 280 Protestants were burned at the stake for heresy. Mary married Philip II of Spain, a Catholic, making England a Spanish ally. The English people hated it. They saw Mary as a fanatic controlled by foreign Catholic powers. Meanwhile, Elizabeth kept her head down, attended Catholic Mass, though she was Protestant, avoided giving Mary any excuse to execute her, waited. November 17, 1558. Mary dies childless at age 42. Elizabeth is 25. Against all odds, illegitimate daughter, suspected traitor, Protestant in a Catholic queen's reign. She becomes Queen of England. Elizabeth's accession was greeted with joy. After 5 years of Mary's religious persecution and unpopular Spanish marriage, the English people were ready for change. Elizabeth's first speech to Parliament was carefully crafted. I am but one body naturally considered, though by his permission a body politic to govern. And I assure you all that though after my death you may have many stepdames, yet shall you never have any a more mother than I mean to be unto you all. She positioned herself as England's mother, not wife, devoted to her subjects above all else, legitimate ruler despite her illegitimate birth. The marriage question. From day one, everyone assumed Elizabeth would marry. Queens needed kings. Women needed male guidance. England needed heirs. Parliament pressured her constantly. Foreign princes proposed. Her advisors begged her to secure the succession. Her suitors included 1. Philip II of Spain, her dead sister's widower, proposed immediately after Mary's death. Elizabeth politely refused. I would rather be a beggar woman and single than a queen and married. 2. Eric XIV of Sweden sent elaborate proposals and gifts. Elizabeth kept him dangling for years without committing. 3. Archduke Charles of Austria. Serious negotiations lasted nearly a decade. Elizabeth ultimately rejected him. Religion was the excuse. 4. Francis, Duke of Anjou, later Duke of Alausa. French prince, 20-plus years younger than Elizabeth. Their courtship lasted from 1572 to 1584. Elizabeth called him her frog, affectionately. She seemed to genuinely consider this one, but ultimately she refused. But the most significant relationship was Robert Dudley. Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, was Elizabeth's childhood friend. When she became queen, she made him Master of the Horse, a prestigious position. Rumors flew that they were lovers. Foreign ambassadors reported that Elizabeth and Dudley were inseparable, that she visited him in his chambers, that they'd secretly married. There was one problem. Dudley already had a wife, Amy Robsart. September 8, 1560. Amy Robsart was found dead at the bottom of a staircase at Cumnor Place, her neck broken. The scandal was massive. Everyone assumed Dudley had murdered his wife so he could marry Elizabeth. An inquest ruled the death accidental, but the damage was done. Elizabeth could never marry Dudley now. It would look like they'd conspired to kill Amy. Elizabeth's public position on marriage evolved. 1559. I will marry as soon as I can conveniently. 1566. And in the end, this shall be for me sufficient, that a marble stone shall declare that a queen, having reigned such a time, lived and died a virgin. 1599. All my husbands, my good people. She claimed to be married to England, to her subjects. She was the virgin queen, devoted entirely to her nation. Why didn't she marry? Historians debate. Theory 1, trauma. Childhood experiences, father executing wives, Seymour's abuse, made her fear marriage. She saw marriage as dangerous for women. Theory 2, power. Marrying a foreign prince meant English interests would be subordinate. Marrying an English nobleman would create jealousy and factions. Remaining single meant she kept all power. Theory 3, political strategy. The possibility of marriage was more useful than actual marriage. She could negotiate with multiple countries simultaneously. Once married, that leverage was gone. Theory 4, medical/psychological. Some historians speculate she may have had physical conditions that made marriage undesirable, or psychological barriers that made intimacy impossible. Most likely, all of the above. Elizabeth was brilliant enough to see that remaining unmarried gave her unprecedented power, both domestically and internationally. One of Elizabeth's first challenges was religion. England had been Catholic under Henry VIII until 1534, Protestant under Edward VI, 1547 to 1553. Catholic, under Mary I, 1553 to 1558. The constant reversals had created chaos. Catholics and Protestants hated each other. Hundreds had been executed for their faith. Elizabeth's solution. The Elizabethan religious settlement, 1559. The Act of Supremacy re-established the monarch as supreme governor of the Church of England. Broke with Rome again, undoing Mary's Catholic restoration, but used supreme governor, not supreme head. A nod to those uncomfortable with a woman leading the church. The Act of Uniformity established a standard book of common prayer, required attendance at Church of England services, fined those who didn't attend. The middle way. Elizabeth's religious policy was deliberately ambiguous. She tried to create a church that was Protestant in theology, justification by faith, Bible in English, but retained some Catholic traditions, vestments, ceremony, hierarchy. Her goal, not to make windows into men's souls. She didn't care what people privately believed. As long as they publicly conformed and didn't threaten her rule, they were safe. This was radical tolerance for the 1500s. Most of Europe was engaged in brutal religious wars. France had the Wars of Religion, 1562 to 1598. The Spanish Inquisition was executing heretics. The Holy Roman Empire was torn by Protestant-Catholic conflict. England under Elizabeth had relative peace. But not everyone was happy. Puritans, extreme Protestants, thought Elizabeth's church retained too much Catholic popery. They wanted further reforms. Catholics refused to accept a Protestant queen or the Church of England. Some plotted to replace her with Mary Queen of Scots, Elizabeth's Catholic cousin. The Catholic threat would define much of Elizabeth's reign. Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, was Elizabeth's greatest rival and most dangerous enemy. Mary was Elizabeth's first cousin once removed. Their grandmothers were sisters. She had a legitimate claim to the English throne, and many Catholics believed she had a better claim than Elizabeth, whose birth they considered illegitimate. Mary's story, born 1542, became Queen of Scotland as an infant. Raised in France, married the French Dauphin, who briefly became King Francis II. Widowed at 18, returned to Scotland, 1561. Remarried to Lord Darnley, a disaster. He was murdered in 1567. Married the Earl of Bothwell, widely suspected of murdering Darnley. Scottish nobles rebelled, forced her to abdicate in favor of her infant son James. Fled to England, 1568, seeking Elizabeth's protection. Elizabeth's dilemma. Mary was a fellow queen, supporting her supported monarchy. A Catholic rival, keeping her alive was dangerous. Elizabeth's heir. She was next in line. No one else had a better claim. Elizabeth kept Mary under house arrest in various English castles for 19 years, 1568 to 1587. During that time, multiple Catholic plots emerged to assassinate Elizabeth, free Mary, put Mary on the English throne, return England to Catholicism. The major plots. 1. Ridolfi Plot, 1571. Planned Spanish invasion. Replace Elizabeth with Mary. Discovered by Francis Walsingham, Elizabeth's spymaster. 2. Throckmorton Plot, 1583. French-backed invasion. Kill Elizabeth, crown Mary. Uncovered by Walsingham's spy network. 3. Babington Plot, 1586. The fatal one. Anthony Babington and co-conspirators planned Elizabeth's assassination. Mary was directly implicated through coded letters. Walsingham's agents intercepted and decoded the correspondence. The evidence was undeniable. Mary had approved a plot to murder Elizabeth. Parliament demanded Mary's execution. Elizabeth hesitated. Executing an anointed queen set a terrible precedent. And Mary was her cousin and heir. But the evidence was overwhelming. Mary had conspired to kill her. February 8, 1587. Fotheringhay Castle. Mary, Queen of Scots, was beheaded. She was 44 years old. She'd spent half her life in captivity. Her final words, In manus tuas, Domini, commendo spiritum meum. Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. Elizabeth claimed she never meant to sign the death warrant. She said her secretary sent it without her knowledge. She was furious, publicly. Devastated, allegedly. Most historians think this was theater. Elizabeth knew exactly what she was doing. She just wanted plausible deniability. Mary's death had consequences. Her son, James VI of Scotland, was furious but pragmatic. He remained on good terms with Elizabeth, who would eventually name him her heir. But Philip II of Spain was outraged. Mary's execution became a justification for what he'd been planning for years, the invasion of England. By 1588, war with Spain was inevitable. Philip II of Spain, Elizabeth's former brother-in-law, had multiple grievances. Elizabeth was a Protestant heretic. England supported Dutch Protestant rebels against Spanish rule. English privateers, basically legal pirates like Francis Drake, raided Spanish treasure ships. Elizabeth had executed Mary, Queen of Scots, a Catholic queen. Philip believed God wanted him to conquer England and restore it to Catholicism. The Spanish Armada. Philip assembled the largest naval fleet ever seen. 130 ships, 30,000 men, sailors, and soldiers. The plan: sail to the Netherlands, pick up Spanish troops, invade England. Spain was the superpower of the era. They controlled vast territories in the Americas, the Philippines, parts of Europe. They had seemingly unlimited wealth from New World silver. England was a small island nation, economically weaker, militarily inferior. Most observers expected Spain to win easily. July 1588. The Armada enters the English Channel. English strategy: don't engage in traditional ship-to-ship combat. Spanish ships were bigger and had more soldiers. Use smaller, faster English ships to harass the Armada. Prevent them from landing. July 28th to 29th. Battle of Gravelines. The English sent 8 fireships, ships set on fire and sent into enemy fleet, into the Spanish Armada at night. The Spanish panicked. Ships cut their anchors and scattered to avoid the fireships. The English attacked at dawn. Superior English gunnery and maneuverability gave them the advantage. Then the weather intervened. Storms pushed the damaged Spanish fleet north. They couldn't return through the English Channel. They had to sail around Scotland and Ireland to get home. More ships were wrecked by storms than by English guns. The result: about half the Spanish ships returned to Spain. 15,000 plus Spanish soldiers and sailors died. England suffered minimal casualties. The Armada was destroyed. Elizabeth's finest moment: the Tilbury speech. As the Armada approached, Elizabeth addressed her troops at Tilbury. I know I have the body of a weak, feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too, and think foul scorn that Parma or Spain, or any prince of Europe, should dare to invade the borders of my realm. It was political theater, brilliant rhetoric that cemented her legend. The victory secured England's independence, Protestant survival, Elizabeth's reputation as Gloriana, the divinely protected queen. The Elizabethan era, roughly 1558 to 1603, is considered England's cultural golden age, literature and theater. William Shakespeare, 1564 to 1616, wrote most of his plays during Elizabeth's reign, performed for the Queen multiple times. His work defined English literature. Christopher Marlowe, 1564 to 1593, playwright and spy, wrote Dr. Faustus, Tamburlaine. His work influenced Shakespeare. Edmund Spenser, 1552 to 1599, wrote The Faerie Queene, an epic poem where Elizabeth appears as multiple allegorical characters: Gloriana, Belle Phoebe. Ben Jonson, 1572 to 1637, playwright and poet, wrote masques performed at court. Theater flourished. The Globe Theatre opened, 1599. Acting companies performed regularly. Elizabeth personally supported the arts, exploration and discovery. Sir Francis Drake, 1540 to 1596, circumnavigated the globe, 1577 to 1580, raided Spanish treasure ships. Elizabeth secretly backed him. Knighted by Elizabeth aboard his ship Golden Hind. Sir Walter Raleigh, 1552 to 1618, attempted to establish English colonies in America. Roanoke, 1585, named the territory Virginia in honor of the Virgin Queen. Introduced tobacco and potatoes to England. Humphrey Gilbert, 1539 to 1583, claimed Newfoundland for England. 1583, trade expansion. The Royal Exchange was founded, 1565, as a center of commerce. English merchants expanded into Russia, the Mediterranean, and eventually India. The British East India Company would be founded in 1600. Science and learning. Francis Bacon developed early scientific method. John Dee, mathematician and astrologer, advised Elizabeth. Universities flourished. But it wasn't all golden. The late 1590s brought failed harvests and famine, economic depression, high taxation for endless wars, increasing poverty. Elizabeth's popularity waned, but her legendary status endured. By 1600, Elizabeth was 67 years old. She'd reigned for 42 years. Most of her close advisors had died. Robert Dudley, 1588. Francis Walsingham, 1590. William Cecil, Lord Burleigh, 1598. She was increasingly isolated, tired, and facing a kingdom with problems. War in Ireland, expensive and unsuccessful. Economic hardship. Factional disputes at court. The Essex Rebellion, 1601. Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, once Elizabeth's favorite, attempted a coup. Essex was young, handsome, charismatic. Elizabeth had favored him despite his military failures and temperamental outbursts. But when she refused to renew his monopolies, his source of income, he led an armed rebellion in London. It failed spectacularly. Essex was executed for treason, February 1601. The Golden Speech, November 1601. Elizabeth's final address to Parliament was her most famous. There is no jewel, be it of never so high a price, which I set before this jewel. I mean your love, though God hath raised me high, yet this I count the glory of my crown, that I have reigned with your loves. It was a masterpiece of rhetoric, reminding her people why they loved her. 1603, Elizabeth's health declined. She refused to eat, refused to go to bed, sat on cushions on the floor for hours silent and still. When asked who should succeed her, she finally indicated, James VI of Scotland, Mary Queen of Scots' son. March 24, 1603, Richmond Palace. Elizabeth I died at age 69. She'd reigned for 44 years, for months, one of the longest reigns in English history at that time. Her body lay in state. Thousands came to mourn good Queen Bess. She was buried in Westminster Abbey in the same tomb as her half-sister Mary. The inscription reads, Partners in throne and grave, here we rest, Elizabeth and Mary, sisters, in hope of the resurrection. So what's Elizabeth I's legacy? She proved a woman could rule alone. Every advisor, every foreign prince, every English nobleman assumed she'd marry, that she needed a man to govern effectively. She proved them wrong. For 45 years, she navigated impossible political situations, religious division that could have torn England apart, threats from Spain, France, Scotland, and Catholic conspiracies, constant pressure to marry or name an heir, limited resources compared to rival nations. She survived all of it through intelligence, adaptability, and political genius. She created a cultural golden age. The Elizabethan era gave us Shakespeare, Marlowe, Spenser, Drake, Raleigh. English literature and exploration flourished. She defeated the Spanish Armada, one of the most significant military victories in English history, secured England's independence and Protestant identity. But she was also ruthless. She authorized torture, executed hundreds, watched rivals and former favorites die, fought brutal wars in Ireland. She wasn't a perfect saint. She was a pragmatic ruler who did what she thought necessary to survive and keep England stable. The Virgin Queen myth. Was Elizabeth really a virgin? We'll never know, and it doesn't actually matter. What matters is how she used virginity as a political tool. She made her unmarried state a source of power rather than weakness. Her greatest achievement? Surviving. From illegitimate child to suspected traitor to prisoner in the Tower to Queen of England, Elizabeth's life was a masterclass in survival against impossible odds. And once queen, she refused to give up power, refused to marry, refused to let anyone control her. She died as she lived, on her own terms. So here's my question. Was Elizabeth the first refusal to marry brilliant political strategy? Or did childhood trauma make her incapable of trust and intimacy? Or both? Drop your take in the comments. And if this dive into Elizabeth I life opened your eyes to one of history's most complex rulers, subscribe, hit that bell, and share this with history lovers. Because Elizabeth I wasn't just a queen. She was a survivor, a strategist, and a woman who rewrote the rules in an era that said women couldn't rule alone. And for 45 years, she proved them wrong.